uh, and we'll be starting in a few minutes. Great to have you here, and we'll start very soon. Thanks very much. Hi, colleagues. I think we'll make a start. Jackie, are you on board this link? We've just had a bit of confusion, ladies and gentlemen, with some of the links. Jackie, are you there? I'm not hearing Jackie, ladies and gentlemen, so just bear with us a moment while we find where she is, and we'll start the session soon. I can see the Vice Mayor from Kigali is here, which is terrific. And I also see, I think our other guest from Malaysia is also there, Madam Maimuna Jafar. So we'll just wait for Jackie Klopp to join. Hi, Jackie, are you on board?
Yes, I am. I apologize. I had a different link.
Sure. I'm really sorry if there was some confusion for everyone. Terrific. And I just wanted to confirm that our Vice Mayor from Kigali is here. Are you here, sir?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks.
Great. Terrific. And I'd also like to confirm that Madam Maimuna Jafar is also on board. Are you there, Maimuna? Okay, we'll do our best to find Madam Maimuna. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure that I welcome you all to our inaugural global webinar with a few glitches on the links, as is the case in these international events. When we all try and connect, there's somehow something that always seems to be a slight issue, and we have to be very innovative in the way that we respond to it. But it's really terrific to have you all here. I know there are people from many parts of the globe in many I'm on mute there. Apologies, colleagues. So welcome everyone to our inaugural innovation event at UN Habitat. It's a pleasure to have you all on board from wherever you're joining at different parts of the world at different times of the day. Thank you so much for making the effort. We're also really thrilled to have a number of key presenters with us today, and I'll introduce our presenters in a moment. Before I do so, I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of the topic, in fact, that we're going to be discussing today about innovation being a transformative force. And I think there are many parts of the world where cities are really struggling with many key challenges, whether it be floods in northern Australia, which once again has made many cities literally be underwater and many residents homeless, to the terrible events that we're seeing unfold in Ukraine, where cities are being literally crushed by war and people displaced. And I think there's a real need for us to adopt creativity, innovation, in order to really make sure our cities are as strong and as sustainable as they need to be. And just to remind you that at UN Habitat, we have a very holistic view of innovation. We see it having both a tech function, but also a non-tech function. innovation is just as much about the new technology that's coming out as much as it is the mindset of creativity, a culture of innovation, things around partnerships. That's also a really cornerstone part of innovation that we really appreciate at UN Habitat. So today we've got a really important lineup exploring this whole idea about how can innovation be a transformative force in cities. And this is not only an important topic for national governments, but for local governments in particular that are often at the coalface of liaising with the various citizens, the various places in cities, both responding to very local issues, but often seeing the city as an ecosystem. So how does innovation work in these contexts? What's been done that's successful? What isn't being done? Are there some ingredients that we can consider? So let me introduce the speakers today, and we're actually going to go straight into the speakers, and we'll start with Professor Jacqueline Klopp, ladies and gentlemen. And Jacqueline is the co-director for the Sustainable Urban Development Earth Institute Climate School at Columbia University. And many of you might know Professor Klopp from the chapter that she wrote in UN Habitat's last World Cities Report in 2020. She wrote the chapter on innovation and technology. And there is many things that we could say about Dr. Klopp, who, as I said, is heading up the Centre for Sustainable Urban Development at the Earth Institute, which is a Volvo Research and Education Foundation's Centre of Excellence on the future urban transport. Jacqueline is an urban action-orientated research scholar who focuses on pathways to safe, low emission, equitable transport and land use, access and city governance. And she is looking into new technologies and mapping to strengthen advocacy for improved public transportation and reduced air pollution and carbon emissions. So we're really thrilled to have you, Jackie, on board. Our next speaker after Dr. Klopp will be indeed the Vice Mayor of Kigali, and we're really thrilled to have you on board, sir, as well. Dr. Merad Mwapangogaru, who is in charge of urbanisation and infrastructure in Kigali, Rwanda. And we'll be really looking to Dr. Merad to tell us more about what's happening in his city and how they're trying to use innovation as a force for change in Kigali. The third speaker we'll have today is Madam Maimouna Jafar, who's the lead technology and innovation director for Iskandar Regional Development Authority in Malaysia. And she will be giving, again, another perspective on how innovation is being used to transform different parts of Malaysia and what they're doing in their work in that part of the world. We'll then be hearing from some colleagues internally reflecting on some of the things that they've heard about the speakers to date, including our very own head of the Regional Office for Africa, Mr. Umar Silla. So it's with great pleasure that we have all these speakers. And then, of course, perhaps the most important part of a webinar is we'll be opening up the floor to you in the virtual space to ask the speakers questions or to pose a comment. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, we do have the chat, and we'd be really thrilled if you would like to put your comments in the chat and any thoughts and ideas that emerge as we go ahead with today's discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd now like to welcome Professor Klopp. Jackie, if you'd like to go ahead and present us your presentation for today. And once again, thank you so much for joining us, which I know is an early morning for you, I think, just as it is a late evening for me here in Australia. So We're in all parts of the world today, ladies and gentlemen, which is very innovative in itself, because a couple of years ago we might not have been doing this. So thank you all very much. Over to you, Jackie, and welcome.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here and be able to talk about the chapter that I participated in writing for the UN on innovation and technology. I just wanted to share my screen and let me see if I can quickly do that so we can have a couple slides. Okay. Are you able to see?
I can see the slides. Yes, Jackie.
Excellent.
You might just want to do it full screen.
Yep. There we go. Okay. Can everyone see this?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. This new Zoom world of ours, Microsoft world, always very interesting. Great. Well, it's my pleasure to talk to you today about innovation technology, and as Melissa said, how we can leverage this in cities to address our very, very serious problems. So the agenda for today is to talk very quickly about what I call the triple transition, where we're at globally in terms of technological transition, energy transition, and then the urban transition. And then I just want to give some very high-level highlights coming out of this chapter. And I really want to emphasize, to begin with, that innovation we define not as technology, they're often equated, but as novel ideas, methods, approaches, and knowledge. And so innovation is a much more complex thing than just applying technology, which is what it is commonly assumed to be by many people. And we understand that because a lot of the new technologies are quite striking and novel. And then we'll discuss some high-level takeaways and policy lessons. We can go into much more depth in the discussion, and I'll leave you with some discussion points. So the triple transition, as you know, we are in a moment of unprecedented technological change. We have exponential increases in computing power. So many people are holding computing power in their hands in the form of a cell phone, where they're have access to all kinds of massive amounts of data, but they're also generating data. We are in an era of big data where so many people using such devices are creating massive amounts of data that require special computing and automation and algorithms to process. We're in an age of accelerated automation, including the rise of artificial intelligence, all kinds of other new technologies in terms of material sciences, and of course our incredible learning in terms of nature-based solutions, understanding the immense sophistication of nature and the way that understanding that and applying that can also help us with many of our problems. And all of this is having an enormous impact on cities, including this new idea of building smart cities, which we'll come back to, using these kinds of technologies and big data. But there's another transition that we must make, as the current IPCC report once again reminds us, and that is that we must make an energy transition. And that is because we are as Melissa mentioned, in a climate and an ecological crisis, which is a profound health crisis as well. And I think it's just very important to remind people that we're going to need a lot of innovation in our cities to address these problems and steer some of the way that our cities are growing and developing in fundamentally different ways. And I would mention that the IPCC has recognized this in its latest report, really saying that we need cities to be centers of innovation for climate resilient development, as well as mitigation, because most of our emissions are coming from cities and city consumption. And the final transition is the urban transition, which we know is taking place. I think I have my colleagues from Africa and Asia where this is extremely clear. We're in a process of unprecedented historical city building, and that means the need to expand services. But if we continue to develop cities, often in patterns of North America, for example, with low density and car-oriented infrastructure and high emissions generating infrastructure, we have the possibility of really locking in low livability, high emissions, and incredibly unhealthy cities that are also vulnerable to climate shocks. And so it is very, very important that we manage this triple transition and that we harness the urbanization. We harness our cities to be civic laboratories and innovation centers. Now, for addressing our problems. Now, there is a movement among cities to create spaces for mainly technological innovation, which again is not necessarily the kinds of more complex innovation we need to solve our critical problems, but it is one element that we need to steer to move in the direction that we need to go. And so one thing that you're seeing, and we describe this in the chapter, is many cities are creating incubator spaces, finding policies and ways to incentives to lure often young people who are the creatives or people who are like developing new businesses. Cities do that by themselves anyway because they're great attractors for people. Also for larger tech businesses, there's a competition almost to bring these kinds of businesses and people who are generating technologies into the cities. And there are very different ways to do this. We have the extreme example of, let's say, San Francisco, which generates a lot of our big tech companies. And, that there is actually an innovation system that's managed in part through a collaborative governance, which I show on this diagram, where you have a connection between the entrepreneurs, the businesses, the universities, the cities, and of course the residents, and this kind of creating a dynamic where the companies are trying to address needs. They're feeding in the research from the universities, and that the cities are actually trying to encourage this both as a way to get revenue, but also to try to solve their problems. But often some of what gets generated actually creates new problems, as we'll discuss. So I just want to say that there's a lot of activity, as you know, in cities around this. And there is, in some sense, many cities that may not be able to develop big innovation systems like San Francisco that are trying to leverage this technology. And some cities that really have a vision of what is called civic tech, which is really using it to support citizen needs and to work with citizens with the development of the technology, versus just fostering companies that will generate technology, which will give you revenue, but then the impacts of those technologies may be complex. For example, like Uber, which has very, different implications in cities. It creates a shared mobility service, but it also may increase congestion and emissions, creating more problems. So it's just important to think about the different spectrum of the way that cities are looking specifically at tech innovation and how they can leverage it. And there are profound challenges. We know that there is an enormous digital divide, both at a global level in terms of access to technologies, including the most basic, like the internet. We know that with automation, we can start to create a lot more unemployment. We know that these technologies can lead to a tremendous amount of surveillance and violation of privacy. People often don't know when they activate location-based apps that they're being tracked. And so basically some of this technology can actually intensify old problems and exclusions and actually generate some new ones. For example, like with e-waste, the massive piles of e-waste linked to these new technologies. So social and regulatory policy will be key to managing this. And then a lot of cities are facing these large tech companies like the ones coming out of San Francisco. Many of them operate on their own to collect data, as I mentioned, through their services. And they sometimes really work to avoid sharing their data that is really important for planning. And there are deep, as I mentioned, privacy concerns. And also they're so wealthy, some of them, that they can influence political systems, including cities in the United States and elsewhere. And so we need to be able to manage these new actors and leverage where we can which parts of their technology are going to help us and rein in the problems. And so in a sense, cities have even more to deal with. Now, one way that cities have been managing these problems and leveraging the technology and the data is by being open cities. First of all, really creating spaces to foster this diversity and creativity and working, for example, with universities and think tanks and creating an openness to new ideas that will generate innovation. And in terms of the technological transition, cities that adopt more open standardized data are actually at an advantage because by, for example, making open standardized data for your public transport system available, anonymized, so you're not jeopardizing anyone's privacy, you can get all kinds of small companies, local companies, to innovate, to create new services. Transport for London does this, and they estimate that they get millions and millions of dollars worth of services that they don't have to create in-house that are helping people in London navigate the system, improving the transportation system. And studies have shown that when transit authorities do this, that people increase their trust and tend to, especially with more information, use the systems more, which again is a win for our emissions, for our congestion, for all the problems that we care about. So this open data movement is very important. And it really is one way that we're going to address some of our problems and foster using the resources, and including these small tech companies, to solve our problems with civic tech. And open source software is another thing to really encourage. A lot of cities get locked into using particular software that's proprietary. It's very expensive. If you want to change, it's very hard. If someone develops something really interesting in one city, it can easily travel to another city and help us out, go to scale if it's open source. So this is also very important. And then I want to draw your attention to the digital principles of development. We really want to leverage digital technologies to solve our problems. There are a series of principles, including using open and standardized data, open source, design for the user, design with the user. And I really recommend that we adopt these digital principles for development very seriously. So I just want to, again, come to the end of this with a high-level point that while there has been this movement towards smart cities, again, often promoted by large companies, large architectural firms, large technology companies, real estate interests to develop whole new cities, even while our cities need support to address the problems. It's that kind of smart city vision is being driven often by a set of actors that are not really focused on the city needs of the majority. And so maybe what we need is not just these smart cities, but smart enough cities. And smart enough cities, I take this from a wonderful book, by the way, by Ben Green, who worked as an innovation officer in the city of Boston. And he talks about smart enough cities. These are cities where the city and the residents are in the driver's seat, so they can really leverage the technology, the new ideas, the knowledge for their needs. And that we must avoid technology goggles. Technology goggles are when we assume that really technology is neutral and that it's going to solve our problems. And so the technology is the solution to our problems, and the technology is going to create the change we need to address our problems. That is not the case, as we just discussed. So we must avoid technology goggles, and we have to focus on the problems. And the innovation, as Ben Green talks about, often comes from within the city government itself through the new processes, the way that we apply knowledge and that we apply the technology to solve our problems. And in the end, we have to really protect human beings. Therefore, digital rights are very important, protecting privacy, but also ensuring that the technologies really address needs. And again, you know, a bicycle may not be that sexy, but it turns out that a bicycle is actually a very excellent technology to help us with many of our problems. And, you know, there are lots of also many entrepreneurs like this young man making sandals out of old tires. So doing, you know, the cyclical economy. And these are all kinds of technologies and that are smart enough that can really help us. And so, you know, again, we need to focus on our sustainable development goals, our new urban agenda, our very serious climate problem, and be smart enough to really move forward. And I'll just end with some discussion points, which are really that I'd love my colleagues to speak to. Are cities currently taking advantage of emerging data technologies to innovate in the ways that I just discussed? How can the public sector, including at the subnational level, innovate more to solve key problems in service delivery and livability? And how can the public sector encourage more investment in needed technologies? Again, these technologies could be the bicycle. Foster local innovation and tech ecosystems, and actively bridge digital divides so we don't leave people behind from the benefits of these technologies, and we use their creativity, like that young man's creativity, to help us solve problems. And do cities have adequate regulatory and policy capacities to address these technological changes? Because that is going to be really important. And if not, what is needed to support them better? And with that, I will end my presentation, and I look forward to my colleagues' presentations on the work they're doing.
Great, wonderful, Jackie. Thank you so much. And I really love that term, which is new for me, about the technology goggles. And I have my glasses on here, and we'll make sure that they don't become goggles. But I think that's a really important point, because often perhaps what sits behind the technology is the creativity and the openness. The technology is only as good as the sort of the people around it, the partnerships that are driving it, the intention of it. And I think all those points you said about, you know, digital rights and principles, that's got to be around the technology, and that only happens when you've got a diverse, perhaps, or a group of people that are looking at the needs, as well as the sort of pie in the sky aspirations that the technology might have. So thank you very much for that most insightful and helpful presentation. I'm now going to move on to our next speaker, and it's with great pleasure that we now go from this sort of very global overview presented by Professor Klopp to now thinking about what this means for people engaged on the ground in city development. And it's with great pleasure that I now hand over to Dr. Merard, who is the Vice Mayor in charge of urbanisation and infrastructure in the city of Kigali, which is, of course, the capital city of Rwanda. So, Vice Mayor, we really are thrilled that you could make it today. I know it was a bit touch and go at some point, but thank you very much for making the time. And we'll hand over to you. Are you there, Vice Mayor?
Yes, thanks so very much for this opportunity. Our thanks go immediately to the Innovation Unity of UN Habitat for having invited us to attend this Urban Innovation Series webinar. I don't know whether you're getting me.
Yes, we can hear you. And if you feel the connection is not so good, you're welcome to turn off your video if that helps. But we can see you at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I was saying we really appreciate your invitation to attend this very important webinar, which underlines how to make innovation a transformative force in cities. Okay, dear participants, allow me to share with you here present in the following 5 main lines how innovations are shaping the city of Kigali. The first, it's in which ways that the city of Kigali is responding to the needs of the citizens of the city and urban challenges through the innovation and technology. In fact, cities need to innovate to survive. Innovative solutions need to be scalable, replicable, and capable of being adapted in a variety of specific urban environments. In Rwanda, specifically in the city of Kigali, we do have a platform that is called Irembo. The Irembo platform was launched by the government of Rwanda in a way of seeking how to create the e-government services to allow citizens to complete public processes online, such as registering for driving license, exams, requesting birth certificates, more than 100 services which are offered by the city of Kigali are given to citizens through this Irembo platform. There is also evolving the private sector in a way of using the innovations. In our efforts to create smart cities, the Rwandan government has launched various partnerships with the private sector, such as mobility, where electric cars and motorcycles are now used in the city of Kigali. We have also introduced tap and go cards that are used for public transport, buses, payments. We already have online health consultations, smart waste solutions, smart street lighting, and more others. All these initiatives aim to improve the lifestyle and social sustainability of the citizens of the city of Kigali and Rwandans in general. Among other things, this project involve also investment in network connectivity and sensor deployment to improve public safety management, utility management, and healthcare. Free Wi-Fi in all our known completed project of public spaces have been installed. especially in the car-free zones. The car-free zones are the areas that have been put in the city for entertainment, for recreation, and so on. Small-scale infrastructure thinking, like from cycle lanes and bicycle sharing, that has been launched in the city last year, to the planting of trees, minimum 3 fruits per home for climate change adaptation. Those have also brought a significant impact on an urban area. On the second, how Kigali has developed a smart city master plan. And on this point, Rwanda has adopted its smart city master plan in 2017, which is a framework that aimed at accelerating the adoption of ICT-driven initiatives in African cities. Since then, we have begun to implement some of the master plan components, which has created opportunities for innovation and improved livelihoods. Kigali Innovation City, free Wi-Fi in public spaces, smart waste collections, like I mentioned it above, smart street lighting, smart parking, and the other projects are among them. On the third point, which is how the city ensures whether the people are at the center of new innovations and technology. I may say that despite the fact that technology plays a significant role in the development of smart cities, we believe that satisfying citizens through easy service delivery and providing a better living environment for Kigali citizens is our primary smart cities goal. The mission is not to invest in technology for its own sake, but to do so strategically to make life measurably better for people who live in our cities. Like I was quoting the President of the Republic of Rwanda. So on empowering people or community, the city of Kigali, in cooperation with the Ministry of ICT, utilizes the Digital Ambassador Program to enhance the digital literacy in Kigali citizens. Thus, their access and use of online systems and services. Connecting Rwanda, a joint initiative of the ICT Ministry and the MTN, aims to increase smartphone penetration in the country while leveraging the digital economy that has enabled low-income people to have access to smartphones. Making access to technology equitable, access to affordable internet, digital skills, and digital devices. There was also deployment of technology and innovation, which is used to ensure sustainability, inclusivity, prosperity, and human rights in Kigali. We apply a multi-level governance strategy to help build skills and the capabilities to develop, procure, and effectively use digital technologies in an ethical and inclusive way to make sure that no one of our citizens is left behind. On how Kigali collects, uses, and protects the data, the citizen data, in order to improve decision making, I may say that through various systems such as the Irembo platform, which I mentioned above, the city of Kigali collects more than 24 civic registration data, identification, and many other services for citizens. We already have LAIS, which is a Land Administration Information System, which is for storing land data. We also have BPMIS, which is a Building Permitting Management Information System, a platform that is used for construction permitting, and the Web GIS, which directs the urban development in the city of Kigali. This is for providing the information on the city of Kigali master plan. The city of Kigali and all partners, including the Ministry of ICT and Innovation, as well as the Rwanda Information Society Authority, collaborate to ensure compliance with the number 05 2021 law relating to protection of personal data and privacy, which has passed in October last year. Regarding the data and digital governance frameworks, I may say that for this, the city of Kigali employs a variety of national policies and laws that are in place, including the National Cybersecurity Policy, data protection legislation, and the National Data Resolution Policy in ensuring that the digital data are protected. The city of Kigali launched a Smart Kigali initiative, which was initially guided by the Smart Rwanda Master Plan. Just to share with you a few of how the innovation, how the innovations are contributing to the transformation of our Kigali, which we call Kigali Yachu, and which aims to be the city of urban excellence in Africa. Thanks so very much.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor. This was a really rich presentation that you made, and you really covered both the very sort of the layers and the holistic way that Kigali is trying to address this question of innovation and technology from both the policy area through to, as you said, very many practical programs relating to both service provision and to also, as you said, some of the policies and regulations that are in place. And I think that those various components are really important. We would love it if you could stay on board a bit longer, Vice Mayor, so you could be around for some of the discussion, because I see in the chat there are some very interesting questions that are being asked about how we can use technology, for example, to tackle corruption in cities, and how we can improve the openness of data. So it'd be really great to have you participate in the question and answer session shortly. So thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on.
Sorry,
yes,
unfortunately, yeah, unfortunately, I'm really sorry, because I will be leaving you so very soon for another meeting. But I would really appreciate if you may share with me some questions so that I will be texting, or I will be emailing you, so that we share the information and the questions that will be raised during my absence. I'm really sorry for that. I should be now attending another meeting that is started 2:30 Kigali time.
Great. No problem. We understand. You might be able to scroll through the chat, Vice Mayor, but we'll certainly make sure that there are some questions that might be of interest to you, and you can see some of the conversations that take place. But thank you very much for your time today, and for the very practical, as I said, the sort of range of ways that we can see that Kigali are trying to use innovation and tech to be a transformative force. So thank you so much. We really appreciate. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now move on to our next speaker, and it is with great pleasure that I introduce Madam Maimouna Jafar, who's the Director and Lead of Technology and Innovation at the Iskandar Regional Development Authority. Maimouna leads the Smart City Iskandar Malaysia team, which is part of the Regional Development Authority, and is the Chief Smart City Officer for Johor Bahru in the ASEAN Smart City Network Program Alliance. And she is also in the Pro Team Committee of the Malaysia Smart Cities Alliance and a committee member of the Malaysia Green Building Council Southern Chapter. So it's with great pleasure, Madam Maimouna, that we invite you to please make your presentation today, and we're really thrilled to have you on board. So I'll hand over to you, Madam Maimouna.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Allow me to share my slides. Yeah, and yeah, again, I'm from an organization which is called Iskandar Regional Development Authority. And like Melissa mentioned just now, yeah, hold on. So I lead the technology and innovation in my organization. And today, I will share a little bit. I think I need to introduce the region. Everyone can see my slide, right? And
That's
I
right.
give
Thank
a little
you very
bit.
much.
Yeah, I give a little bit on why technology and innovation is very important to the region, to ensure that we remain competitive with other cities as well. And thirdly, I will share a little bit. I think Prof. Jacqueline talks a lot about smart city. So we have our own smart city, Iskandar Malaysia, and to us, it's actually a tool to accelerate our Iskandar Malaysia sustainability targets. And then I'll touch a little bit because I think both Vice Mayor and also Prof. Jacqueline talks about data. So I will share a little bit on Iskandar Malaysia Urban Observatory, which is actually a platform for informed decision making. And lastly, I'll share a little bit on our challenges in driving smart city together with the 5 local authorities in Iskandar Malaysia. So in general, the region is actually located down south of Malaysia. So we was established in year 2006 with a sustainable ecosystem, looking at how we can make this region an international standing metropolis. So within the region itself, there are 5 local authorities. So the cities campuses of Iskandar Puteri, Johor Bahru, Pasir Gudang, Pontian, as well as Kulai. So we are already in our 16 years in formation. And I think within that 15 years or 16 years, we have actually decided that for us to remain competitive, for us to remain relevant as a future-proof region, we need to look at technology and innovation as a catalyst for Iskandar Malaysia. So what will be our strategy when we talk about innovation? So for the organization itself, we want to promote technology and innovation to actually improve productivity and quality of life. And we are looking at how we can actually develop Iskandar Malaysia in optimizing innovation, as well as looking at how we can inculcate culture of innovation within our communities and also our business communities as well. And we are also acknowledge that the Industry 4.0 remains an important agenda, not only for Malaysia, but also for other countries as well. And we are also looking at how we can adapt and improve the data transparency, access and accountability of data, and lastly, looking at how we can actually planning, promote, and facilitate information technology. So when we look at all of these, we are looking at 3 important programs. Of course, one is a smart city. Second, we are looking at Iskandar Malaysia Urban Observatory. And lastly, we are looking at how our communities can actually absorb or look at digital commercialization as way or means to increase their income level, as well as deal with the day-to-day operational of business, as well as doing things. I think when we look at this pandemic for the last 2 years, we also acknowledge that digital has become a very important element in our day-to-day life, as we do a lot our online business, online working, and also meeting people like what we do today. So in our Smart City Iskandar Malaysia framework, we actually started this in year 2012, and there are actually 6 dimensions and 4 enablers. So we are looking at, of course, the normal economy, environment, living, governance, mobility, and people. But more importantly, for the last 10 years, we realized that if we want to drive smart city and become a champion to our city region, we need to have a big data platform, a platform that can actually analyze data, a platform that can actually integrate and collate data. Secondly, we are talking about the importance of this infrastructure. Not only we are talking about the availability of the infrastructure, but also it needs to be fast, it needs to be reliable, and also it needs to be affordable. Third, we are talking about how local authority needs to actually become the champion and driver to improve public services, which actually is a big game changer actually to these local authorities. And lastly, we talk about how to meet the challenges faced by local authorities, the private sector needs to come into play where with their knowledge on technology, innovation, and also funding, they need to actually work together with the local authority to enhance quality of life of people. But actually, I think Prof. Jacqueline also talks about the meaning of technology. So for the last 2-3 years, I've also facilitate other cities within the state and also Malaysia. I realized that some of the small cities are not actually ready in the game of smart city. So that's why we have actually developed 3 categories of smart city projects. One is the beginner, and in this beginner category, we talks about how sustainability is the main focus on this project. So we are talking about out of the box ideas, new ideas. It's not only about technology. So category 2 is actually the intermediate, where technology can become the enabler to the projects, but the data might not be integrated. And the last one is actually under category 3, whereby we define this as advanced smart city program, where projects or program or objects are actually connected to devices where it is being collected, integrate in that big data platform. So I think what I want to do now, I think echoing to Prof. Jacqueline thoughts about this technology innovation in helping local authorities to better improve their services, I want to give about 2 case projects, and I will also share on how we want to utilize data for an informed decision. So the first project, I'm looking at how we actually engage communities for smart integrated mobility management system framework. And this program is actually a project funded by UK Prosperity Fund, and it's actually a system that uses data to enable transportation network management in Iskandar, Malaysia. So the whole framework talks about regional ITS projects to address broader sectoral problems in collaboration with relevant agencies. So the benefit to this, if the project is being rolled out, will allows one of the benefits actually allows for quick data analysis without having to go into the dashboard for more in-depth assessment. And it also can able to give a real-time based on situational analysis to the end user. And I think more importantly, this project allow us to engage stakeholders, which is our communities on the ground. And the process is actually quite tedious. So through these SDG tools, we are able to engage our stakeholders on the ground in a more structured manner. And this engagement is being made through assistance by UN Habitat from Malaysia based, and at the end of the exercise, we are able to identify the issues, what the improvement requires, and recommendation has been made to make sure that when we actually develop the framework, we keep in mind that the minorities, the people with disabled, the elderly is being taken care of. So I think through this SDG tools, we'll be able to engage better with the local communities on the ground, and they also understand what we are trying to do and how this project can actually benefit them. The second case project, I think one of the questions in the chat box just now, I think mentioned about how local authorities can actually benefit from data. So the case project 2 is looking at how we optimize data for river monitoring and management tools. So looking at this, we have a one of the river in our region is about 47 kilometer length, and this river actually falls into 3 different local authorities. So we have Iskandar Puteri, Johor Bahru, and also Kulai. So the challenges for this river is that the quality river quality index is currently at level 4, and there are high ammonia content causing there's actually a water treatment plant, and this actually caused the water treatment plant unable to actually treat water. It also have flooding issues and also floating solid waste. So using Smart GIS, we actually collect data, but currently we are doing this manually. But however, with the system or the S3 system that we are currently using, we are able to actually identify the hotspots area. So if you can see the red spots on the plan on the left, those are actually the hotspot areas that we have actually identified. And they are merely, for example, like market, individual septic tanks, and so forth. So with the analysis that we have done, we also create some hypotheses and scenarios to really understand why the hotspots actually are unable to actually resolve for so many years. So from this exercise and hypothesis, we actually do the actual work whereby we have actually cleaned about 500 old housing dwellings within the hotspot areas, and we found that our hypothesis and analysis is correct, because when we actually clean those septic tanks, we realized that they are actually drastically lower ammonia discharge into the river. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if you use the right data, if you are able to actually identify and map where are your source of pollution, then you'll be able to actually monitor and manage and put in the right implementation mitigation to the problems of your polluted rivers. So these are the 2 projects that I think I want to share to all of you, so that you understand how we use data to actually make that informed decision. And moving forward, when we realize that the importance of data, so we have actually received a big funding actually from federal government to do a pilot project on what we call Iskandar Malaysia Urban Observatory. So this is actually a central data repository platform that collate, update, analyze, manage, and disseminate data. So if you see on the left chart flow, we are looking at how we can use advanced analytics to do scenario planning, to actually forecast things that might not be happen or will happen in future. And we will also use some hypotheses to really understand what's going on and put in some recommendation. So currently, we are actually looking and implementing this urban observatory in 3 ways. So we have the core IMUO, including the hardware, storage, and data. And we use data analytics into certain elements that is important to us. For example, on economy, on transportation, spatial planning, quality of life, and social development. And then with that, we actually create a dashboard to really understand where are we standing at the moment and see how we can actually move or put in action plans for the future planning. And I think these are some of the pilot project when we talk about dashboard. On the left-hand side, this is something that we have actually worked on when the pandemic started in year 2020. We have actually pull in the data and work with S3 to see the pattern of how the pandemic actually spread out. And we are able to actually look at how we can actually manage or control this pandemic at certain area and certain zones within the state. The second one, dashboard on the right, is actually enable us to make or understand our economic pattern within Iskandar Malaysia itself. And the chart on the top is actually talking about tourists entering Iskandar Malaysia from Singapore, Indonesia, and so forth. So these are how we use data so that we know when we do market for our tourism products. So we go to Singapore, Indonesia, China, and so forth, meaning that we can actually focus where we should actually go and market our tourism products. So lastly, what I want to share is actually the challenges. So I guess for the ASEAN cities, since I'm also representing Johor Bahru in the ASEAN Smart City Network, we did discuss among ourselves. And I think the understanding of the overall concept for smart city and its benefit is actually new. Many stakeholders, especially the leaders, have not have enough exposure to it. There are also some uncertainties if this technology that we want to use or want to innovate can actually improve our quality of life. And secondly, when we talk about data collection, sharing, and privacy methodologies, this is also something new. Not all data has the same attribute, so we require to do standardization. And data, many agencies are not ready to share data. And this is something that we are working on closely with State of Johor and the local authorities to actually see how we can resolve some of this stumbling block. And lastly, implementation costs and project sustainability. I think when we look at innovation, when we look at technology, of course, local authorities might have limited development funds. And also understanding of project implementation, procurement is also important. And more importantly is that we need to have a self-sustained business model so that our projects can actually go far, not just within 1 year or 2 years. So it needs to be sustainable, self-sustained, so that this project can go on forever. And I think when we look at smart city, I know some of us may think that there's a lot of financial burden when we want to do smart city. Again, remember that there are 3 categories of smart city project. Start it small, then you can move into the intermediate, and we can go into advanced when you are ready to look at how you can connect your projects into smart devices. So smart city benefit, help increase engagement, reduce environmental footprint. This is actually some of the tools to achieve low carbon city, assist in making effective data-based decision. And also I look at smart city project as catalyst to economic development opportunities. and gaining capability to improve quality of life, as well as looking at the overall agenda of becoming a sustainable region of international standing. I think with that, Melissa, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Maimouna. That was a really rich presentation. And I really liked a couple of the points you raised, particularly about this concept of the power of diversity and really some of the examples of bringing different people and together. And also your point about smart cities and really what is smart and how do we communicate better the benefits of the smart city. And I think that's why in particular UN Habitat promotes a very people-centered, and we sort of talk about people-centered smart cities in the way we describe it. But people need to have the confidence that this is an approach that's worth taking.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for those points, and I hope you can stay around for the question and answer
Sure.
session of the webinar. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure now that I would actually like to call on UN Habitat's very own regional director for the Office of Africa, Mr. Umar Silla. And Umar, I know you're extremely busy, so we're really thrilled to have you with us. And Umar has a very vast experience both within UN Habitat but also outside of UN Habitat, and worked in Africa for a very long time, and has really been at the coalface of seeing many cities grow and change and people grow and change. And I'd like, Umar, for you to make some reflections on some of the ideas that you've heard today, and what are some of the challenges that you think many sort of cities and particularly governments might be facing to get their people around this question of innovation. But also, I think what's important, what are the opportunities you are seeing in different parts of Africa that we might be missing or not understanding, and that might not even cost a lot of money? So I'll hand over to you, Umar, just to make some reflections, and thank you very much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for giving me this opportunity to talk about this very important topic about Africa. And we can see from the previous intervention, some commonalities, some we can call, if you want, some universal principle that can apply to Africa. Of course, when it's come to reflection, let me start also with what we call the opportunities, because as you mentioned rightly, Africa is facing the rapid trend of urbanization, and one of the fastest, urbanizer continent in the world, and which is quite, seeing emerging secondary cities that need a connection, but also they need, economic tissue to be established, but also looking into this young generation, that Africa is promoting now, and which has embracing this innovation technology and very, eager as well to learn more about this. So we can see a fertile ground, for this, emulation of a lot of innovation on others. So on that, I think the mayor of Kigali has mentioned a lot of, example from Kigali. He become, a classical cases now for Africa, because all this progress we are seeing. But also you shouldn't forget, if you want, this regional dimension, because African Union is more promoting this smart Africa, which is, if you want, global or regional, political will established by member states in Africa to promote smart cities as an enabler for economic transformation in Africa, in line with the Vision 2060 of Africa. But also at the level of UNECA, I think there's a lot of innovation going on now on e-trade, e-commerce, that allow even Ethiopia now to commercialize coffee in a few seconds, where they can connect, the different part of the world on commercializing, this kind of product and others, which mean that regionally speaking, and talk about integration, that another dimension we can look at when it comes to the issue of innovation. At the country level, let's see as a country which is doing a lot now on innovation technology. One is Kenya on the financing aspect, even for accessing to mortgage. Our housing system in Kenya, you can get access information and other related, rate, through your device system. But also on the transport system. I mean, Kenya has created its own Uber system, which is Bolt, which is a connectivity system that people can use using, their technology device, as mentioned by Jackie Clapp, in her presentations. What I like of Rwanda, and something which is I'm passionate, me on that, Melissa, from my past experience on working on land. Because when it comes to investment, I think the aspect of land is very important. We have seen tremendous, progress in Rwanda on land registration and digitalization. They can allow people to go to transaction in seconds, and get everything done and get to all title system. That's one area we can look at as well as enabling for business, as what Van is talking about, what we call this business ranking system, where this land registration is one of criteria, because it is something which is contributing, to developing, registration for business, for commerce and others, which is another area. Another one as well is Senegal on transport system. Recently, they launched what we call this express regional train, which is based on the high tech, high tech as well. But of course, you may look at some challenges when it comes to high tech in Africa, especially I come to that on the maintenance system. That's why we need to look at the degree, of sophistication of the technology of innovation in Africa. They may not cost. And the same discussion we are having on the land registration system as well. And lastly, on post-conflict, which means that it's possible, to have it even post-conflict. Recently, UN Habitat work in Somalia, in Goma, has trickled down to establishing, if you want, a taxation system based on digital system, which is accelerating, transaction, but also giving clarity on who is paying, who is not paying, which means that there's a lot of, of innovation going on in Africa. I think so my colleague from Malaysia has spoken about the good things of this digitalization. Of course, first, advantage for Africa as well is, the fastest transaction we can do now. M-Pesa here in Kenya, you can do your transaction sitting on your sofa, drinking your tea, and pay your utility bill, and even sending money to many people. But so connectivity, connecting people, even right now you see, people who have not been educated, going to school, they don't need to go there to get access to the device, as mentioned by Jackie, and they can communicate, but also discuss business and discuss social matter, social connectivity and others, but also the element of efficiencies. Of course, we need to look at the element of data security, which is quite something very important. But something we learn as well on this innovation and digital system in Africa, this has boosted the informal sector. Of course, we are talking about informal sector as long as it's not in the book of the government and people are not paying tax, but people are using it to develop, the business, the informal sector is booming. And that's the reason why this blanket of security during the COVID-19 has been very efficient, because people was able to use money transfer or, all this device transfer, to help each other in terms of solidarity, but also in terms of, of connecting each other in terms of transfer of funds, which means that even informal sector is just, growing and booming and using these devices. So the whole question now is a regularization, and that's where the element of policy and legislation is very important. Of course, we couldn't talk about it in Africa without mentioning some challenges, because there's a long way to go about it. Many cities are still struggling with basic planning system and public space. And I like the way, this challenge that Jackie has brought, during her conversation, the concept of smart cities in Africa. And this is, if you want to, concept of smart city becoming something full to. We put everything on the smart city. And I believe that smart city is a combination of different elements or different ingredients. They can speak to livability of cities, but also to living condition of citizens, and not looking into, the element of sophistication of devices. But what is important, the social feeling of communities on that. So I've been in Mozambique in April, during one of my mission. There was small public space that UN Habitat helps the community rehabilitate it. And one private sector come to establish one, devices for people to get access to internet. And 6, p.m. in the afternoon, there is convergence of all purposes, quite, the city is going to there and meet each other, young people playing, and adult, converging and discussing what they see, from this network, which is a way of creating this social cohesion. That's why we need to be very careful as well as the definition of the smart city, to see what are the prerequisites for this city to be smart. Social cohesion and culture is very important for me. You mentioned about it, but access to minimum of utilities like energy system. I mean, if you have in Africa 56% of population living in informal settlement without water, without electricity, of course we are trying to educate them to that, but we need to look at this fundamental and how this technology can accelerate the delivery of the services for those communities. In terms of challenges, of course, training capacity, you mentioned it. I think it's very important to look at how we can establish more center of excellence for the youth to educate themselves, but also to have a way of championing themselves on different, innovation and finding and others. But also we need to look at policy and regulation. That's why I was thinking how this national urban policy can be, if you want a convergence of all those ideas of policy and regulatory framework by establishing the basic principle, for regulation. I think it's possible because national urban policy is cross-cutting and looking into different area and various area, multi-sectoral, multi-level governance in terms of managing our cities and our urban settings. So how we can promote this national urban policy as a, an integrated, tool to address those matters. But also inclusivity is very fundamental for Africa. So because we do not want to use this, new technology as a, and increase the, what we call the digital divide. Of course, a lot is happening, but there's more that need to be done to make sure, the woman sitting in the informal settlement can talk to the one sitting, in the CBD in Nairobi, but also how we can use as a way of integration between communities and going beyond our divergence. And I think so. The whole question now is really how to resolve this digital gap in Africa. And I think that's where UN Habitat is working with this people-centric smart city. Just to finish with some initiative we are working on and to really make sure, as things, as mentioned by Jackie, we are trying to make it, social and make it people-centric, this concept smart and digital. So recently with UNDP, we embark on developing what we call a regional program on smart and resilient cities, which is looking into multi-factor risk. It's a way of using, technology on prevention, on adaptation, but also on make sure citizens can communicate and can have, early warning system in preventing those disasters can happen to them, as we are seeing in South Africa or in Madagascar and others, which means that there's a lot and area for investigation. There's a lot for innovation. I think, as mentioned by Melissa, is about putting our head together in terms of partnership, in terms of peer learning and exchange together to see how we can learn from each other on the best practices for promoting this digital system as a way of fostering social cohesion, but also economic development and transformation in cities in Africa. Those are some elements I would like to bring on the debate, Melissa. Again, thank you very much for giving this opportunity. So I will have to leave in 3 minutes, but now feel free to get back to the floor. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Wonderful, Umar. Thank you so much for your time and for those really important points. And you covered many things there, but I think you're raising the issue of innovation around land, which is, as we both know, is still a very powerful commodity in many parts of African cities and indeed in other parts of the world. I really liked your point about getting innovation to address the informal sector, and both as an opportunity, as you said, the informal sector is able to use many of the opportunities of technology through e-commerce, through M-Pesa, such as what's happening in Kenya. But I really like your point about using innovation to address the many outstanding and long-standing service needs around basic services in slums and informal settlements, housing, that sort of thing. Often we perhaps equate the smart city as having something very upmarket, forgetting perhaps that there are many millions of people still don't have the basics in place. And how does innovation, in fact, how is it fast tracking getting those needs met for them? So some really great points amongst many. Colleagues, we've come to the perhaps one of the most important sections in these sorts of webinars, where we hand over to you to perhaps make a comment or ask some of the colleagues that have been invited to give presentations today, any questions that you might have for them. So I do invite colleagues to perhaps raise their hands in the chat. If people go to the reactions button, which is on the top of there should be on the top of their Teams screen. If you click on that reactions, you'll see a hand there, and please feel free to raise your hand. Unfortunately, the Vice Mayor and my colleague Umar have had to leave the call, but we still have Jackie and Madam Maimuna from Malaysia on board. So I would encourage colleagues to perhaps ask a few questions. I noticed that we've already had a couple of questions around open data, around using tech to fight corruption, around how we perhaps frame smart cities to be more applicable to to many people in cities, and certainly decision makers, so they see the value of smart cities. So they are a couple of questions that already have been raised. While we wait for some people to put their hands up, Jackie or Madam Maimuna, I'm wondering if you might have any reflections on some of the comments that perhaps even Umar and the Vice Mayor made while we open this discussion up now to everyone. Jackie, maybe I'll ask you first, and then I'll come to you, Madam Maimuna. Jackie, did you have any comments or reflections on some of the points that you've heard so far?
Yeah, I would just say, as I mentioned in the chat to some of the amazing comments we're getting, that it was great to see how both of the speakers defined smart cities as really leveraging technology to support needs and to address serious problems, including environmental issues. So they really had a very people-centered approach, which I thought was really important, because there are a lot of different smart city concepts out there. And I think Umar also pointed this out, that we have to be very careful about what we mean, which is why I like talking about a smart enough city, smart enough to be able to solve our problems. And I really was very pleased to see also that you mentioned, Melissa, the large numbers of very poor people living in poor neighborhoods that are often part of very vibrant, out of necessity, small businesses, and making sure that we address that deep inequality problem with how we're approaching smart technologies and innovation, and recognizing their innovation is very, very important. And I'll just make a comment, since open data has come up. I think there's a lot of work to be done to show, to get over the resistance of people sharing data, which is often coming from the fact that they may not have the best data. They're a little bit ashamed, or to show that they're working on not the best data, which is often not their fault, or they don't understand the amazing benefits you can get. Or honestly, sometimes coming to the point about corruption, we see this, that people commodify data and make money off of it, and sometimes irregularly. And that is a very big problem. So that needs to be addressed. So it's a hard struggle, but I think we need to keep moving towards those principles of open data, open standards, open innovation, open source. So I'll stop there. There's a lot more to talk about, but I'll give my colleague a chance to respond.
Thanks very much, Jackie. Yes, as usual, some great points you've made. Madam Maimuna, maybe you'd like to make some reflections.
Yes, I think I want to point out one matters that I think most of the cities that I've talked to is having a problem. Because I think when we talk about smart city projects, we need to prioritize first, and then we need to know what are actually the urban challenges that the city face. Because I counted that some of the cities when they talk about, for example, smart traffic light, they find that smart traffic light is a project that is easy to do. But again, in the smaller cities, if you don't have a challenge in traffic jams, and things like that, don't get excited and put in smart traffic light. So you might get trapped in this smart city excitement. And I think you need to really understand that for you to jump into a smart city project, you need to understand your urban challenges and prioritize your urban challenges. And secondly, I want to talk also about the data. And I think I agree that sharing data is not something that agencies wants to do. So we need to start small. So for example, the work that I'm working on, we are actually looking at how we can standardize the data. I think I mentioned just now that data is everywhere. I think most people have data, but I agree with one of the comments just now. They don't know that they have that data, and they don't know how to use the data. So for a start, I think we need to standardize the data. We need to actually structure the data and make sure that everyone have the same data catalog, so that when we integrate and collate all the data, then it would be under one systematic ways. Is it similar like when you want to do a library? That's how the analogy that I've been using all this while. And I think when we talk about data, not many people also understand or seriously talk about cyber security. Yeah. And I think even in Malaysia itself, cyber security is new. So we need to really understand that data is gold. So people would want to hack our hardware, our storage, and actually steal the data. So again, cyber security is important and not being mentioned or focused as much as the data itself. So again, remember that cybersecurity is important in this data-driven era. I think that will be it for now, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Madam Maimuna. And I think that whole question about data is also it's a very powerful tool. And I see our my colleague Robin Dunga is on this call, and I'm sure he might have a few important points. Perhaps I can coax him out at some point. But I think it's also something that perhaps must be more transparent, and the more open we are, and I think then we can make it, I think it makes it more difficult, in fact, for people to use it the wrong way, or even the perhaps security breaches to be around it, because people, it's all known. When data is sort of hidden and it's not made collectively available, I wonder if that creates a sort of a shroud of mystery around it a bit, and therefore it becomes a powerful tool. Yes, it's a very an ongoing challenge for us all. Now I can see there are a few hands up, which is great. I see my colleague Abdinasir has his hand up. Abdinasir, go ahead. And I can see then also Majdi. Forgive me if I pronounce people's names incorrectly. And then there's another speaker, Fanisa. So let's start with you, Abdinasir, and then I'll call on the others. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks to our presenters for the very insightful presentations. I have a very brief question to kickstart this Q&A, and my question is about the people-centered element. And I wanted to hear from Jackie and Madam Maimuna on their experiences about some of the aspects related to that. Of course, at the core of people-centered is to really allow people to participate, and also to ensure that these solutions are addressing the needs. And I wanted to focus on some of the processes we have. Two processes. One, procurement, which local government use to acquire technology. But we all know these traditional processes are still very closed process, in that it's only for public sector officials who sort of design the solutions, who go through the process. So how can we, I wanted to ask, how can we let local governments be open in this traditional, very closed processes. Thank you.
Would one of you like to respond to Abdunasir, and then I think we'll go on to the next couple of questions.
Maybe I can start first, yeah, Melissa.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Please
So
go
I
ahead.
think, yeah, when we talk about people-centric experience, I think one of the projects that we are doing, or when we are actually developing our roadmap, we use actually surveys to really understand the community concern, because at the end of the day, the local government are actually the driver for some of the smart cities project. But again, when we look at the prioritization of the project, we can actually map up or metrics to the survey that we have actually conducted to the many communities on the ground to really understand what is their main concern, what are the main issues that they are having on the ground. So by doing that, we really understand the needs of the people on the ground. So when we want to select an appropriate smart city project that we want to embark, we are able to do that. So I guess cross-referencing, mapping metrics of the concern of the people on the ground, and also the projects that we want to do will really help us to prioritize which project that we should do first and which project that we should do later stage of our work. Yeah, so I think those are the methodology that we do when we engage our people to really understand their needs. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jackie, did you have a response on this question of people-centred, and particularly Abdunasir's focus on this question of procurement in sort of local authorities and how they can use innovation and tech to make that more open and transparent?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to the procurement part. Well, first of all, there is some really interesting work being done on making contracts, the procurement contracts, open. So I have colleagues who have worked with Global Integrity on some really interesting software and projects around that. So you could start to see where you might have some irregularities in procurement, but also where maybe people are replicating things and procurement is a bit of a problem. But there also needs to be more awareness that maybe you can avoid having to procure services if, for example, like Transport for London has done, they make some of their data highly available. People generate services, for example, City Mapper, which is an excellent app to help you navigate through London's complex transport system using that data that they get that's open and standardized. That's a great service. Transport for London never had to procure it. By opening the data, they could create it. And then actually City Mapper went farther and they used the data and analyzed and saw that there were some routes that need little shuttle services and they started to provide those. So Transport for London didn't have to procure those services. So there's ways to make the procurement process more transparent and also to start having more requirements that whoever is providing a service might have to use open source software. Just more understanding of contracting that will help you. And also to make sure sometimes people procure things and sign contracts that the city doesn't even own its own data from some of this stuff. So that kind of literacy around data and the digital principles within cities and in procurement would be very important. So it's a really great question to ask. Thank you for it.
Thank you. And I think that question of literacy and capacity, in fact, to really understand what's there and what's at stake is that's a really great point. Thank you so much. I'd now like to turn to Majdi. Go ahead, and apologies again, colleagues, if I'm pronouncing anyone's name incorrectly. Go ahead.
Thank you, Melissa. It's correct, Majdi. I'm Majdi from Tunisia, urban planner. I am working with the UN Habitat Tunisia office. And my question is addressed to the all speaker, honorable speaker. I want to know if there is any real example about how to integrate the informal sector to make our city more smart and more functional. Because in Tunisia we have this problem, and this is the main problem that made our city not functional. So I really appreciate the example, for example, of the example of Omar about using internet to make our public space more inclusive and more secure. It's better to share with us if you are testing a real example to integrate the informal sector in the local economic development, for example, and make our city and make the city more inclusive and more economic. Thank you very much.
Yes, a great question. Thank you so much. Uh, Jackie or Madam Maimouna, would you like to respond to this question about how do we sort of reduce really the sort of spatial, social and economic divides that we know exist in cities, particularly those cities that have these huge informal sector, informal settlements? What ideas might you have there or reflections to make?
I let Jackie to go first, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can jump in. Well, first of all, there's a lot of great young innovators in those communities. They often by force have to be innovative to survive. And I think providing services to help them improve, whether that's really making sure that there are good schools, that coding is taught, for example. One thing that is becoming a bit of a push even in my own city in New York is really providing all kids with access to some of these skills that they can really use because of our new sort of economy that's based so much more on digitization and data. You don't need a lot of formal education sometimes to actually be able to learn how to do some of this, contrary to popular opinion. And so being able to then give those skills so that these young people can apply them is very, very important. But general services like education is really, really key. And making sure our colleague from Kigali was talking about making sure that people have access to, phones, making sure people have access to free web, internet, is all very important to address the digital exclusion. But again, we need more basic social policy to make sure that resources get into these neighborhoods and we don't lose the talents of and the innovative capacity of these young people who live in these communities. Not just young people, but they tend to be the digital natives, even in my family. So they tend to also be able to adapt and use these technologies better. Yeah.
Great. Yes. No, thanks, Jackie. I think this idea, I liked your phrase, sort of educating people with the skills, and it's almost like the skills for creativity are really important, and to harness what's there in all sectors of a city, including the informal settlements and slums. Madam Maimouna, did you have a comment, response to the question? And then we'll go to our final question.
Yeah. I want to talk about how we innovate people within our country. So actually, we realize that leadership is very important, and even at when we do programs at school level, we find that what important is we need to find that champion. Yeah, because sometimes the people or the teachers who champion might not be or have ICT related background, or they are not programmer. They are people who are actually very passionate to innovate. So in one instance, there was actually a religious teacher who wants to champion this. And very importantly is that the guidance from the teacher itself enable the student to be excited and try to innovate new things and new ideas. And we also found out that at school children level, children at urban area tends to be not as creative as people in the rural area, because in rural area they are actually the person who actually wants to make things better, whereby the children in the city, they are actually the end user. So I guess when we look at innovation and things like that, we need to make sure that the rural plus the city have the same opportunities to actually explore innovation in making things better or easier in their day-to-day life. Yeah, that is actually our experience in Malaysia.
Great. I really, really liked your point there about this concept of champions. And I think that's a really, another really key point is that if you want to create a culture of creativity, you really do need the leaders to, and not only just the known leaders, but other leaders in communities to champion innovation and technology. So that's a terrific point. Thank you. We'll just go to our final question here, and Fanisa, thanks very much for waiting, and please go ahead with your question. Really appreciate.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So I would like to share and discuss a point. So before I joined UN Habitat, I worked with Thai government for 4 years, and then I was in the process of smart city indicator development. So I can see that Thailand and Malaysia, we have very similar context on development of smart city, and I really like the point that Professor Jackie talked about open data. So 2 points together. I think what I would like to discuss is about the key issue for the successful people-centered smart cities. I think it's about personal data protection. So when we talk about personal data protection law, it regulates from when data can collect, what can be collected, and how to store the data, how to share the data. And one point that I really like is about how to delete the data, because when I had conversations with data engineers, they told me if you don't have like explicit policies about data deletion, the data will be forever, and that then the rights to be forgotten of us will be forgotten. And then so the law is quite complicated. In Thailand, we have the law for 2 years, and it is exempt to get everyone on board, because it's not only private sector. There are government sector and people sector that can will be related to personal data protection. So what I would like to see how in other countries how they make people get on board, because I think this is the most difficult part to make everyone be aware of how to collect the data, or even for like a citizen like us to be aware of our rights.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. A really important question about data there, and how do we get everyone on board, but also people understanding all our rights. And I'll just quickly ask if Jackie or Madam Maimuna have a response before calling in my colleague Katia, who heads up the People-Centered Smart Cities program, to make a short reflection. Jackie or Maimuna, did you have a quick response to Fanisa's point?
Yeah, just a quick response. I believe that when we want to start to work with other agencies or our stakeholder, first of all, it would be much easier if we have a project to work on. So that data, I think there's a lot of data out there, and people actually don't know why we are collecting data, why we need the data. But if we have a specific project that we can work on and make them understand that, if you give us this data, this will be the outcome of the data where we will analyze, and we will give back the outcome in terms of the analytical that we do with the data that you give to us. This is actually your benefit. So this is how we get people on board, to make them understand that why data sharing is important and how data can actually help us to develop that informed decision in policy making. So create that project and make them understand and work with data standards and data catalog. So I think those are the strategy that we are working on at the moment. And I think it will works that way, you know. If not, you go to people, you say you want to collect data, they will not understand. So work within a small project first, and then you can actually scale it up. Yeah, that would be my quick answer for you. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Jackie, did you have a quick comment before I hand over to Katia, please?
Yeah, very quick. I just want to say that the technology and the change and the data uses is going very rapidly relative to our legal work around all the issues that you mentioned. I do think that the EU has, perhaps some of the better protections right now through their GDPR, their General Data Protection Regulation. And so I do think there's a lot of legal work to do, but that's probably a good example. And I know Kenya, for example, has just passed legislation kind of using that example. Yes, the legal work is really important, but there are networks that can help you think through these issues. And we're going to have to keep evolving our legal frameworks to address all this technological change and its implications. So thank you for raising that.
Great. No, thank you very much, Jackie. That's right. I think it's a bit of a cat and mouse game at the moment for indeed the legal and the policy frameworks to keep abreast of the rapid change and the demand on data. Vanessa, thank you so much for that comment and for that question. Ladies and gentlemen, we're close to finishing time. Unfortunately, I have to say I've been really so enjoyed this conversation and thank you all very much for attending. But before we go, I've asked our colleague Katia Schaefer, who heads up our Smart City, people-centred Smart City flagship program at UN Habitat, just to make some short reflections on what she's heard today, and then I'll briefly come in at the end. Thank you so much, Katia. Go ahead.
Thank you, Melissa. I hope you can hear me and I'm not facing a digital divide. Is it okay? Yes, okay. Thank you very much. It is a very challenging task, actually, to provide the concluding words here. But I have to say, I took notes and really tried to structure a little bit more on a strategic level the points that were raised by the discussants. Thanks so much, Jackie, and also Madam Maimuna for your inputs here, but also the Deputy Mayor from Kigali and our colleague from the Africa office. I would like to actually highlight that UN Habitat, when we discuss about urban development, it's really a process. It's an urbanization process, and it's not at all about cities, but rather a territorial dimension. And I must say, many people, in fact, who come from areas that are traditionally left behind could actually be looped in using, different means of communication. Let's say looking at addressing the digital divide from the perspective not only of elderly people or poor people or less literate people, but really looking at the wide spectrum of people that could benefit, in fact, from the digital transformation agenda that we are currently discussing. And that will actually help also in addressing other development challenges. And thanks, Melissa, for saying that UN Habitat actually has started to embrace the discussion on smart cities from the point of view of the users, that city or urban development, urbanization processes should benefit people. And hence putting people right at the center of this discussion is really our kind of work that we have embraced in order to better understand. And I think many of the elements came across here. What does smart city mean? Is it smart enough? What does actually engagement of people mean in this wider process? How do we understand the different needs of people? And I think I would like to highlight here maybe within the framework that was also mentioned of the Sustainable Development Goals, but also the New Urban Agenda, how digital transformation can actually add value. And I have to say, if at the pace that we are currently trying to, work towards achieving the SDGs, we will never reach there. And I think I see a very strong opportunity of doing things differently. And I think that is where the innovation part comes in. That's where also technology can assist in accelerating, basically understanding the scale of development needs, visualizing them maybe in a way that decision makers can better guide policies, let's say, but also going at faster scale towards impact and improving people's lives in cities, in villages, but also on the move, let's say, as we have also recently, observed urbanization and migration are key drivers of the development discourse as much as climate and digital transformation alike. And if we revisit, in fact, the key elements of implementing the New Urban Agenda, which is looking at policies and strategy levels, looking at legislation, looking in fact at economic or let's say financial means to make urban development happen, looking at planning at scale, and looking also at local implementation. I think all these 5 elements could have a potential for embracing, let's say, the digital transformation agenda, embracing migration elements, embracing the climate discourse, but also the what did I forget? The 4th element, the urbanization in its core, let's say. And one thing, Melissa, I did not hear here, but I think Ms. Maimouna highlighted that. She called it the project approach. We would call it maybe a challenge-driven innovation, where basically municipalities are kind of enabled to understand, to guide based on a certain challenge that they're facing at local level to approach this. And it does not always have to be, state-of-the-art technology that is being used. Maybe it's the bicycle approach here sometimes, but doing things differently and doing them creatively and asking actually people for answers to their challenges is maybe quite interesting and also brings basically the beneficiaries in this case closer to their local government that is in fact fully embracing the development agenda and is not always, let's say, prepared at the scale that they have to embrace. So I think I would say as part of this discussion on localizing the New Urban Agenda and also embracing digital transformation for innovation, let's say, capacities of local governments need to be understood. And I think here we need to basically ask them, and we have in fact interviewed quite a few local governments to better understand what they need. And I think maybe one of the colleagues could also place the playbook series that we have started drafting in this regard, because addressing the digital divide has a few key principles that need to be looked at, as well as what is basically a digital transformation strategy for a city, for a region. Rwanda was mentioning an example here, but it's also that we don't have to reinvent the wheel again over and over. If we have principles in place that we could check if they're relevant to your context, so that we can assist, in fact, in guiding basically urban development policies alongside digital transformation strategies for smart enough cities, let's say, that fully embrace development agendas for their citizens and people who reside in certain locations. So I think these for me are kind of reflections I have seen very strongly, and I also very much appreciate the challenges that were highlighted that we have. One is, of course, the ever-increasing pace, logarithmically increasing pace of digitalization that we as human beings are not really fully capable anymore to keep up abreast with. But I think legislation definitely needs to needs to fully guide this process in order to really not go astray. Here, data, of course, was highlighted as one of the key challenges. And I think it is important that local governments are aware of that, but we work together with let's say, digital transformation partners and national governments to really get the right legal frameworks in place, to have the right financing means to really address the digital divide and fully embrace digital transformation as a means to trigger innovation, but not, let's say, being the hammer that sees nails everywhere, but really being creative in finding solutions that address key urban challenges. I wanted to also highlight maybe here. There are, I think many of our colleagues here are aware of the large scale of informality that cities are embracing. And I think here, in order to understand better the scale and the extent of informality, I think digitalization or digital means can help us to embrace that. But then, of course, local governments, private sector and other development partners have to embrace the understanding of that in order to address informality and address lack of access to basic services and so on. So I think let's put the lens on, leaving no one behind, looking at the most vulnerable, looking at countries in the global south, let's say. I think we don't have to look necessarily always on going the same development trajectory that other countries have undergone, but really being innovative and appropriately addressing solutions in different contexts is something that can help to really achieve those and even go beyond the sustainable development goals, because I don't think they are ambitious enough with the challenges we face here on this planet. And I think, I'm really looking forward to continue working with all of you. And your suggestions of today's discussion are fully taken note of. And if there's any more inputs, please do reach out to us, Melissa. And the team is ready also to onboard you as partners. And I think I conclude here and wish you all a nice evening from Nairobi.
Thanks a lot, Katia. Great summary there. Colleagues, we are just a little bit over time, so I think I need to thank you all very much. I would like to particularly thank all of you who've come on board today, and thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Professor Jackie Klopp, whose wonderful sort of policy level insights, but also started to bring it down to the practical, Jackie. Was really appreciated. Madam Maimouna, we really appreciated your reflection on what's happening through your work on innovation and technology, and really some of your really important insights around smart cities as well. The Vice Mayor from Kigali, unfortunately, is not with us now, but he gave us some very practical ways that Kigali is trying to address very everyday needs of its citizens, as well as put in place some of the policies. And of course, we heard from Mr. Umar Silla, who's our Regional Director for Africa, on some of the challenges and opportunities that are in the African continent around innovation and technology, but reminding us about the many basic services that need to be met for many thousands of people, and maybe innovation and technology could be directed that way. Keep an eye out, ladies and gentlemen, for the work that we are doing on innovation. We'll be having more of these sorts of innovation webinars. I've put in the link to our innovation webpage on our corporate website. You've had the links to also our work on the smart cities, our smart cities flagship program and our playbooks, but there's plenty more on the corporate website for you. Thank you all very much for attending. Thank you, colleagues, for supporting, and wishing you all a great evening, a great morning, or a happy rest of the day. Thank you all very much. See you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Goodbye. Bye.